This week, does your public school offer a school-based health center? The Lion uncovers politics masked as healthcare. The brutal beating of a 15-year-old girl outside a Missouri public school. What is making some school kids so violent? The panel debates. And a Lion exclusive, an Indiana student punished for flying the American flag in the school parking lot, and why his dad says his son's a hero. These stories and much more coming up this week on The Lion Week in Review. Welcome into this week's edition of The Lion Week in Review. It's a weekly look at the culture, the courts, your state capitol, and your kids. I'm Chris Stigall. Now, let's meet our panel, some of the men and women behind the stories at readlion.com. Michael Ryan is executive editor at The Lion, Josh Mann, managing editor, and Faith Perkins, staff writer at The Lion. Welcome, gang.
Thank you.
Good to see you all. We start this week with a really powerful editorial, Michael. I have to say, I read it. I loved it. I shared it personally. I think, broadly speaking, it is, for those of us of faith, it's kind of the whole shooting match, just the whole ball of wax.
Well, I appreciate that. And, if you want to get any news out, you get it to Chris Stigall because he has quite a posse out there on Twitter. I've been mulling over for a long time the fact that America's in a world of hurt, literally. I have tried applying civics. I became Mr. Civics for a while, and I still am. And you got to push politics. I mean, that's how we get most things done in this country. And we need to keep working on those. But at the end of the day, that's really not going to be our salvation. We're in that bad a shape. One poll last fall said that 76% believe the nation is on the wrong track. Another poll had 78%. The fact is that we're indoctrinating our youngest students into believing that life's meaning comes from their bodies, from sexuality, from gender identity. And when we have an existential vacuum, when there's no meaning in our lives, society has told us to fill it with everything under the sun that doesn't fill it. Drugs, sex, rock and roll, whatever it is. Everything but God, everything but what works. And I guess God would be uncomfortable as a talking point in society. But in fact, this election year, we're going to have a lot of talk about quote unquote Christian nationalism, which is a bad thing, right? And they've put Christianity and patriotism together under one roof and made it bad somehow. I'm not sure how they did that. I guess the bottom line to what I wrote is, can we save America without God, and why would we even try?
In the Christian education movement, Josh, it's something that I hear those in opposition to often, to Michael's point. There is this strident desire to draw this line of demarcation between God and people of faith and what they learn in school. And that's just not the way it was a few decades ago. No one thought of school as being antithetical or separate and apart from your faith.
Yeah, we have this bizarre, we're just enamored with secularism. And, Europe has this reputation of being ahead of the United States in terms of its secularization. And yet I lived in Britain for 5 years, and it's amazing how there isn't such a strict line. I mean, my son, when he began school, went to a Catholic school called St. Patrick's that was government funded. It was just one of the schools he could go to, and any student in the village could go to outside of Durham. And you don't see this strict line. And I think Michael raises some really great points. I mean, some of the questions, does America need serious healing? Are we so different from the ill-fated Roman Republic? I mean, that right there is kind of a scary but powerful question. There's a quote attributed to John Adams, which I'm sure many of in our audience have heard. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. And it's interesting, when you read Michael's piece, you see this language of being unmoored and this sense that somehow we have no moral authority. We're like a ship just sort of floundering, and perhaps foundering on the rocks. And you have to replace that with something. I mean, And if it's just whatever floats your boat, to stay with that metaphor, I guess, that's kind of a scary place to be as a society.
It is, to your point, and I've heard someone else say it's not my point, but everything is a religion. Even if you're not someone who believes in God, even if you're a secularist, you do adhere to a religion. So if it's not that, you'll put something up there, right? Faith that is your obsession and your singular focus. And for a lot of secularists, I guess, as Michael said, it's sexuality or what have you, but you have a faith in something. Everybody does, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. This is a powerful piece, and I highly recommend it to everybody. And Faith, back to you, by the way. You have written a piece, and I think this probably dovetails nicely with the editorial, this awful video, and we're seeing more violence out of school kids, and one wonders if it doesn't relate directly to what Michael just editorialized, but tell us about this awful story.
Yeah, so this actually occurred on Friday around 2:30 p.m. I think the students were headed home from school. They were a couple blocks from the high school when a fight essentially broke out. I don't even think the one student threw a punch, but she was slammed, thrown to the ground, punched in the face, and then slammed her head into the concrete. Yep.
And Michael, this is much like the shooting stories that we've seen in the Super Bowl parade, young people involved there in Philadelphia just this past week. You've had 9 young people shot, 1 critically wounded. Looks like young teens were involved in that too. This is that reoccurring theme, much like you wrote, it seems, young people being violent to the point of killing one another.
Yeah. Well, and to the point of the column, I'm a student of Viktor Frankl, who was a Holocaust survivor, and he wrote Man's Search for Meaning. And he said that when you have an existential vacuum, when there's no meaning in your life, it tends to get filled by one of 3 things or multiple of the 3 things: aggression, depression, and addiction. And we're seeing a lot of that today. I'd love to tell you what I think about this story out of Hazelwood School District in St. Louis, but I think Jason Whitlock, who used to be a Kansas City sports writer and is now one of the great voices of Christianity in the secular media, puts it best, if you'll indulge me. He said, "We teach victimhood and grievance. Our young people are more callous and savage than previous generations because we've convinced them that they're all victims of sexism, racism, homophobia, Islamophobia, fat shaming, transphobia, poverty, pronoun injustice, you name it. They're all owed a debt. Unpaid debts foment anger. Victimhood produces rage and animus." And he goes on beyond that, but he's absolutely right. This is almost being taught.
Yes. And Faith, if I could just follow up, do you know any more about what happens to students who do this? I'm always very interested in kind of the follow-up. Is there any kind of punishment?
Oh, yeah. So one student, 15-year-old female, she was actually arrested on assault charges. And then the victim, she's critical in the hospital. But I know a lot of people on social media are calling for more arrests because there was dozens of viewers that didn't do anything.
Josh, this is something, you talk to people that teach in public school. I never mean to sound across the board anti-public school, but you talk to a lot of public school teachers who genuinely love teaching, and they will tell you, so many of them will tell you, it's this kind of just madness that they, in some cases, aren't even allowed to stop anymore.
Yeah, they might not be allowed to stop it. Some of them, in one of our stories, there was a teacher who got his arm broken. He had his arm broken by intervening in a fight where apparently a student, I think, lay unconscious, and he was simply, desperately trying to protect the student from further injury. And this teacher's comment was, "Oh, I will not intervene again because of what happened." I think a lot of teachers we're hearing they don't feel supported by their administrators. There's a fairly progressive liberal push against traditional discipline in schools. They cite statistics that suggest that certain races are more penalized. But in another article actually we published recently, there's a lot of, stats can mean a lot of things and you can kind of twist them. And so it's not, we're so hyper-focused on race and equal outcomes that sometimes I think we're losing sight of, we just need consequences, old-fashioned consequences, and we need to get ahead of some of this behavior. We're seeing it in the criminal justice system generally. It's a real concern.
In fact, if memory serves, was it not just last week or recently we talked about a school district or a school board voting on this very issue, right? Reining in punishment or
Yeah,
getting
that's
involved.
right.
I think
That's
you just
right.
wrote about this
That's
recently.
right.
We turn now to California, which always promises to be an interesting discussion when you're talking about public school districts. California's school district paying a social justice group to train up high school students. Michael, probably not the first time we've heard of this, but public school students, private monies teaching public school students how to become political activists.
Yeah, well, when I was in high school, I sold shoes, and now they're selling grievance, I guess. They've replaced wood and metal shop with the grievance trade, as it were. It's the stuff of Bolshevism. Except I don't think the Bolsheviks thought of paying the students for being indoctrinated. And they call it action civics. This isn't civics, number one. Civics is having an understanding and appreciation for our system of government and your role in it. No, rather, this is the seeds of grievance and grudge, which invariably grow into hatred.
I remember the first time that I ever was sort of aware of politics in my public high school, Josh. I remember we had to do a phone bank to call the public and encourage them to vote on a school bond issue. And I remember even as a kid, not really understanding politics too well, thinking, something doesn't feel quite right about this. This is not that. That seems benign compared to this.
Yeah, I think that might have been illegal, but I'm not entirely sure what the laws were then.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we talked to Erica Sanzi, the spokesperson at Parents Defending Education, and she just said it's taxpayer-funded propagandists. That's what she called it. These students, some 78 of them, were paid $1,400 each to participate. If you're a high schooler, I don't know how political you really have to feel to say that maybe I'd like to sit and learn how to do this for $1,400. But in the end, they are. They other critics call them social justice warriors, and I don't even think that the organization that puts it on would bat an eye at that phrase. I think they're probably proud of it. That's what they are trying to create. And the school is sort of washing its hands of it by saying, we're not instructing them. This is this other group. And I think the school called it an internship. So who's accountable here? I mean, nobody's really being held to account.
The story of yet another, this may be the third show in a row where we've done a story about school board members in trouble. I don't remember in my most of my career covering news, I don't remember so much news being written about school boards, Josh. But here's another school board member who's in trouble for harassment.
Yes, it's an incredible story. It's really right up the road from where we sit at this moment. Whitney Lanning is a school board member in the St. Joseph School District in Missouri. And after a close vote, a 4-3 vote in favor of maintaining a 5-day school week, which Lanning was opposed to, she wanted to move to 4 days. She allegedly went chasing after another school board member, Mrs. Garcia, and threw some of her property against the wall, was screaming profanities at her, and chased her, according to the police report, through multiple rooms. And so she's actually been charged with a misdemeanor harassment, and her court date's set for the day after the school board election. Now, Lanning isn't up herself, but 3 other seats are. And so there's been a lot of controversy, a lot of, I guess, heat in the meeting. But, this school board member certainly seemed to have taken it too far and now is, facing criminal charges. Yeah,
Faith, I know you don't live too terribly far from that. Is there an emotional pitch about a 4 versus a 5-day school week? Do you know much about that? I didn't know it was so emotional. Have you heard much about that?
No, I haven't heard any emotion behind that. But I do know that she said for her reasoning was that it was targeting her children, like the vote was, and that's why she was upset with the other school board member. And I don't know how it's targeting her children.
Yeah, that makes no sense. Michael, 4 days versus 5 days warrants now harassment, if not maybe full-blown assault.
Yeah, I'm going to run out and get a bumper sticker that says it's not always about you.
Yeah.
I guess it's a trite question to ask, but I think it goes to the heart of what we're talking about here. What kind of role modeling is this? And I think people who are evaluating her tenure on the board, her tenure at the nonprofit where she works, ought to ask that question first. What kind of role modeling is this for kids? And that question takes on special resonance when you hearken back to the story of the Hazelwood assault and near homicide, and the fact that kids today seem to have no compass when it comes to dispute resolution. Now you have a school board member having no compass, apparently, allegedly, with regard to dispute resolution, and this is what you see. And I got to say, recalls should not be taken lightly, and they're looking at a recall in this instance, and I think it's worthy of looking at anyway.
And just while we're on the subject, Josh, 4 days versus 5 days, you say they took a vote. This has come up before in discussion, just kind of backing away from the assault charges or the alleged assault. Is this catching on, or are people rejecting the idea of 4 versus 5 days?
Yeah, I mean, we've recently had some research done in this state, in Missouri, and a majority are opposed to shortening the week. And so most parents still favor 5-day school weeks. And, there's a number of rural districts in Missouri that have gone to 4-day weeks, and there's certain reasons demographically why rural districts do that.
Is that financial largely?
Financial, and there's this sense, there's also a little bit of a teacher shortage. Sometimes smaller districts find it difficult to keep and retain teachers. There's an idea that a shorter week is more attractive. I mean, I'll work 4 days a week for the same pay. But there's a lot of problems. There's problems with parents having to find childcare on that day. There are also questions. The jury's kind of out in terms of what's the student outcome. And in fact, the research that we've recently covered shows that there's more reason for concern, that some of the studies actually do suggest negative outcomes. Some studies just suggest it's neutral, but there isn't compelling evidence that it helps students or even that it retains teachers.
Well, and our friends at the Show Me Institute in Missouri have done their own research on this, and they found an alarming lack of research on this, even though we're diving into it. Do you realize a third of Missouri school districts do 4 days now?
Is that right?
Yeah.
A full third?
Mm-hmm. Most of them rural.
But has it been studied yet as to the outcomes? I suppose it's all fairly new.
The Show Me analysis says there just isn't data enough, but there are signs that it's not a good idea.
Now we turn to a Lion exclusive. It's interesting when my family relocated from Pennsylvania to Missouri. One of the things my son said, they left a fairly large suburban Philadelphia school district, and when they came to Missouri, they were stunned to see students that were flying Trump flags or American flags. That was certainly verboten in the district they came from. This exclusive, Josh, is somewhat like that, an Indiana school.
That's right. So this 17-year-old senior at an Indiana school was flying an American flag from his pickup truck.
Just an American flag.
Just an American flag. And he was told repeatedly, according to his father, who we exclusively interviewed, that he needed to stop flying the flag. But the son, we were told, looked through the handbook, looked for all the rules he could, made sure he was complying with state law as well as the student handbook, and told the superintendent, no, I will continue to fly the flag. Here's the handbook. There's no rules against this. His father told us, he warned his son, he encouraged his son to think hard about what you believe in and be willing to face the consequences. And the father was content if his son was willing to continue to fly the flag, understood the consequences. He was completely supportive of him. In the end, finally at the end of the week, a bunch of students showed up to the school with flags on their vehicles, and that may have been what led the superintendent to actually change his mind. Now, since the superintendent gave us a statement saying that, the story went viral on Twitter, thanks to Libs of TikTok, and the superintendent insisted his decision to allow the flying of the American flag from student vehicles came before the story went viral.
Sure.
Maybe that was the case, and maybe those students, the overwhelming support led to that. But what the father told us was his son is his hero, that actually he's very proud that his son, fully understood the possible consequences and stood up for his conviction that flying the American flag was not only lawful, but it was a good thing for him to do.
One of the most important lessons he may learn in his young life. Faith, of all the things going on in public school today, of all the distractions, of all the things that could possibly go wrong or kids could get into trouble for doing, flying the American flag does not seem to rank even in the top 20 that I could come up with.
No, it seems pretty minor, especially because it's outside in the parking lot. It doesn't come inside with you.
Yeah.
We certainly had a lot of pickup trucks with the American flag at my school.
Yeah, and Michael, even if it was inside, even if a kid wore an American flag shirt inside, it seems that there are schools that would give a kid trouble for that, which is just crazy, but that's where we are in 2024.
Yeah, the district seemed to hang its hat on the safety issue. Are the flags, securely on the picket? Will they block the view? Will it go through somebody's windshield? Well, if that's the case, then have requirements that you follow state law on how to do that, which the father actually took pains to do. But just to have a blanket prohibition on flags, especially the American flag, is something else. This story at the bottom is about leadership, and the leadership this kid showed, and he's my hero too. It's sad, though, that the adults in this story had to be taught that lesson by a high school student. And it's also sad that flying an American flag today is an act of rebellion. I have to wonder if a pride flag or a BLM flag would have gotten the same treatment. But, regardless, the father prepared the son to face any punishment that the school might mete out, which I think the civil rights pioneers will tell you proudly take it.
Amen. And finally, we have covered this before on this show. That is the School-Based Health Center, or SBHC, Josh. This is something that I know federal funds have come into in many different instances, or maybe in all instances. I'm not entirely sure. But the politics of these, like everything else, there's politics to it. And this story is no different.
That's right. School-based health centers.
What are they? I guess we should start from the beginning.
Yeah, they're basically health centers that are based in schools. And so the idea is that students can receive medical care, things that they might need. Usually it's billed as helpful to low-income families, maybe families without insurance. Often things are reduced or free of charge. But it's part of the growth of government-funded services that are being dispensed through public schools. And the big concern with these is that they often come with a liberal agenda behind them. So, for example, they dispense free abortion or abortive pills, and even gender-affirming so-called care or treatment, or things such as chest binders or other mechanisms for students to present as the opposite gender. And, usually there's not a lot of parental consent involved. In one case, there was a center that does require a permission form from parents, but it's generic. It's just, and once you've got your parent signature once, you can go back for other reasons. You don't really need a new signature. And so Parents Defending Education actually has a database of these, and it is long. Almost every state is on there with certain examples of districts. Some states have many districts with these. And the final thing I would point out is there's a similar push in California and maybe some other places called community schools, which again is this idea that the local public school should dispense all kinds of government services because it's kind of the hub of the community. And I think those who are maybe wary of big government need to keep their eyes on their public school and how much is our government services sort of try to be run through it.
Yeah, Faith, miniature clinics inside of public schools. I remember the days you'd go down to the school nurse and there was a debate as to whether she'd even give you a Tylenol. Now, you're talking about maybe young women who could go down there and say, hey, you have any abortifacients I could tap into? It's a far cry from at least what I grew up knowing.
Oh, yeah, same. I wasn't even able to get like ibuprofen without parental consent. And I think the article also shows that if they were to go to like a normal hospital, they would need parents' permission. So this is kind of a work around the system.
It does just seem, Michael, like it's this constant attempt at every angle. The government continues to try to subversively get in there to the kids, right?
Yeah, there's a theme here.
Yeah.
There's a theme that they're going after kids in every possible way, primarily to shape their bodies and their beliefs. Your kids are now societal lab rats. You know, they're being experimented on in order to create this leftist utopia that has never been found in history. For perspective, in my newspaper career, I could not, if I was reporting on a school, I could not take a photo of kids without parental permission. So think about that. I mean, they were protecting the kids' images, and today we're trying to protect their souls, which is why today I am establishing the Lion 90-Day Challenge.
I like it.
I challenge you to read The Lion for 90 days and see if it doesn't inspire you to move heaven and earth to protect kids.
Beautifully said. Josh, this is, public schools offering full-blown clinic health care. Again, once upon a time, the debate was, free school lunch and whether that was the appropriate metric, but now it's almost like they want to create miniature villages where a kid from cradle to grave almost could get care, food, counseling, and we're building something other than an education facility, clearly.
Yeah, and I think, those who support this fully believe that they're doing the right thing. In fact, people who are subverting parents' rights think that they're being sympathetic and protecting these kids from their parents' crazy beliefs. These people actually think that. And I think it actually goes back to Michael's column. It's this idea of this moral vacuum. We don't have, as a society, some commonly understood basis for what life's about. What is our purpose? What is our meaning? And so those who have abandoned God quickest and easiest and for the longest time tend to be those with these liberal progressive views. And so, yeah, they want to get as far away from that moral authority as they can because they know a better way.
Christian schools, at least all that I know, work hand in glove with the family and with the parents. And it seems the consistent theme more and more is public schools almost reject the parents at home or work, not in concert for sure, maybe in some cases work against the interests at home. I've never seen such a stark comparison where the lines are drawn, Michael, and it's school versus home. And, that's why, at least I personally will say, advocating for a relationship, not just with, a God-centered education, but family working with the kids. I've never seen it so adversarial, I guess, for want of a better term.
No, it's true. I mean, and I don't necessarily advocate corporal punishment, but one of my friends recalled an incident when he was in grade school. He got in trouble for some silly thing. He got paddled by the teacher, got paddled by the gym teacher. He got paddled by the principal. He went home and they had already heard about it and he got paddled there. I mean, they used to be on the same team.
Yeah, that's right. Well, before we wrap up today's show, I always like to ask you guys your favorite stories of the week because there's so much. If you haven't been to readlion.com, there's just every day there's brand new stuff. They churn it out faster than I can read it all. So, Michael, what's one that you're watching and looking at that people should see?
Well, I'm going to cheat. I'm going to go back to the young man standing tall for the American flag at his high school. I'm commissioning that a sculpture be built, a replica of the flag raising at Iwo Jima, only with high school kids.
Faith, your favorite this week?
So mine's actually one of Michael Ryan's. He did an interview with Senator Josh Hawley about TikTok.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, TikTok in the news this week. And Josh, how about you?
We've got a story coming. We'll be live by the time this episode's live on Missouri Senate passing a school choice expansion. And so this expands our current program. It basically now it moves to the House, so there's still some work to be done, but it would raise the cap on the tax credit program to $75 million a year. It would also take away the geographic restrictions. So all Missouri families that meet the income threshold, potentially, their students would be eligible for the Mo Scholar Scholarship. This pays for educational expenses, including private school tuition.
Missouri getting closer.
Eating,
nibbling around the
Yes,
edges. Just
yes.
can't quite get there.
Yeah, that's right.
But getting closer. All right. Well, we'll continue to hope they do the right thing in Jefferson City. And that will do it for us this week. I hope you'll keep up to date on all the latest news every day at readlion.com. For all of us at The Lion, thanks for downloading today's show, and we'll see you next time.